This is a 2003 Porsche Boxster S, and it is a truly fantastic sports car bargain. Although a lot of Porsche purists say a 911 is the only real Porsche, the truth is those people don't matter if what you really care about is driving. And this car offers a fantastic driving experience and an amazing sports car feel for the money. Today I'm going to review this 986 Boxster and explain what I mean, and I'll show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, big news, this Boxster S is currently for sale and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This is a later model Boxster S with a 6-speed manual transmission, and it's being auctioned with no reserve by Hot Rod Geller. So once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this Boxster S, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. Alright, time for the quirks and features of the original Porsche Boxster, which is called the 986 model. That's what the enthusiasts call it, and it came out for the 1997 model year. And probably its biggest quirk of all is that the entire front half of the car is shared with the 911. Not a lot of people realize this, but the Boxster and 996 911, which came out in 99, the front half is identical. And I'm not talking it looks similar, I mean the parts, the fenders, the hood, all of that stuff is literally the same between the Boxster and the 911. And it was also true of the interior. The dashboard, steering wheel, gauge pod, all that stuff was basically entirely shared between the Boxster and the 911. Essentially, the entire front half of the car, short of the windshield, was basically carried over between both vehicles, which, when you think about it, is a pretty risky move for an automaker to come out with a base model entry-level car and have it share so much with the beloved, desirable 911, the iconic car that everybody dreams of owning, has its entire front end lifted off the base model. But that's what they did, and it allowed Porsche to spread over development costs between the two cars and keep costs down in a time when Porsche really needed to save some money because they weren't in the best financial situation. They didn't exactly develop two cars for the price of one, but they developed two cars for maybe the price of 1.5, and it really did help them financially. Now, the drawback of the Boxster sharing the front end with the 911 from this era is the headlights. Specifically, the Boxster, like the 911, has the headlight design that people don't like. Instead of a circle or an oval like in other Porsche 911 models, you have this sort of melting oval deal that was trying to bring Porsche into the modern era, but sort of fell flat. It was popular at the time, but as the cars have aged, it has not been particularly beloved on the used market, this front end look, and that's just a reality of the 986 Boxster and of course the 996 911. But aside from the front end design, this was a pretty attractive car. Porsche did a good job keeping the proportions simple and nice and clean without going too crazy or excessive. It's just a nice looking, kind of basic design sports car that really has a clean, fresh look. And a couple of fun fact quirks about the outside of this car. This is a Boxster S, and of course there was also a base model called just the Boxster. You can tell them apart in two ways. Number one, the exhaust. All Porsche Boxster models had a center exit exhaust, but in the base Boxster you had one single exhaust tip, and in the Boxster S you had two. So technically a dual exhaust, even though just one center exit location. The Boxster S also had red brake calipers, as you can see, which helped distinguish it from the base Boxster, which did not. All Boxster models, however, had a rear spoiler. Most people don't realize this. You can't see it when the car is off, but it activates automatically around 50 miles an hour. It comes up in the back, as you can see, and there's a little rear spoiler back here, I guess to provide a little downforce, a little more stability when you get going and when you're at speed. And next up, up, let's talk interior, which I will say is interesting. For one thing, it is quite quirky with some bizarre details I will show you, but also there was the issue of quality, which is a pretty common complaint about Porsche models from this era. In addition to the headlight design that people generally don't like, another complaint about the 911 and the Boxster from this generation, the interior just wasn't all that nice. And indeed, it's kind of true. I would say that this car came from a transitional era in Porsche interiors. They moved away from the just straight horizontal line, basic focused interior of early models, but it was before they got on to the more luxurious interiors that came later. They tried to add some design, some swoops, some curves, but they also sort of cut costs on materials. And so there's more plastic in here than you might expect. Some panel gaps are pretty big. It's not the highest quality interior Porsche made, and it's a little bit disappointing. And that is a complaint that has always dogged the 986 Boxster and the 996 911. And in addition to that, there are definitely some bizarre quirks of this interior. For example, I showed you the rear spoiler could go up. I mentioned automatically at 50, but there's also a button inside the car that'll put it up. How do you do it? Well, it's this button in the driver footwell, this unlabeled switch out of sight, out of reach for some people. That's the spoiler button, and you press it and it goes up, and you press it the other way and it goes down. An unbelievably weird positioning for that feature, especially when you consider there are other options. In the center control stack, 3 blank switches over on the left. In the center console, 2 here in the center. There were other things they could have used for the spoiler button. Instead, they chose an unlabeled switch in the driver's footwell. Another thing I've always loved about these cars is how Porsche didn't really want to translate stuff if they didn't have to. So when you turn on the climate control, if you're not using automatic, it says manual, but it's manuel, which I imagine is how it's spelled in German. Porsche was like, you know, it's close enough to English, probably French too. Let's just leave it and they'll figure it out. Same deal with the menu button on the CD player. It's menu with an E at the end, which I imagine is how it works in German, but in English it was close enough. They didn't want to translate the button because then they would have had to make different buttons for different markets. They said, forget about it, let's just go with it. They'll figure it out. Now, one nice quirk about this interior is despite this car's small size and it's a 2-seater, it actually has a surprisingly practical interior. Over on the passenger side, you can see there's a glove box in the dashboard, which wasn't always a given. Early 911 models from this era did not get one, but there is one here. And you also have a second locking storage compartment here in the center, so you have kind of 2 locking glove boxes if you want. I also always loved what Porsche did with the door panel storage compartments in this car. You have this opening in the door with a lid that kind of partially covers it. So if you want to reach in and grab something, you can, or if you want to open the lid and kind of root around to find something more specific, you can do that too. It's actually kind of a neat idea, and it's on both doors. You also have storage in this car for your CDs. In the center control stack, you can see 4 CD storage slots where you can stick your CD when you're not using it and keep it nice and safe until you're ready to stick it in the CD changer, which, by the way, is in the trunk. The storage is in the car, but actually using the CD changer, well, you gotta get out and open the trunk. Next up, another interesting quirk in this car. Like other Porsche models from this era, the central dial in the gauge cluster is the tachometer, not the speedometer like in basically every other car. It's the tach. The speedo's over on the left, and at the bottom there is a digital speed readout, so you don't have to try to make sense of this sort of smaller speedometer dial. On the subject of the gauges, I do love that they have the Porsche font. Porsche was using this font in a lot of marketing stuff and other things in this era. These sort of italicized numbers, kind of cool, makes it look a little bit more exciting than your regular gauge cluster. Also, another interesting quirk of this gauge cluster, it's open at the top. You can see kind of below this panel on the dashboard, but above the gauges, there's an opening so you can stick your fingers through. I have no idea why it's open up here, but it is just another quirk of the 986. And here's here's another interesting quirk, the cup holder situation. The center console doesn't have any fixed cup holders. Instead, you got to go into the center control stack. There's this little panel with an image of drinks. You press it and it pops out and reveals one cup holder, but if you look closely, there's a little arrow on this piece. You pull it out and it reveals a second cup holder. A little bit of a flimsy cup holder situation, and of course it's right over a lot of important electronics you wouldn't want your drinks to get on top of if they spill, but nonetheless, those are your cup holders. And here's another interesting quirk. Your windshield wipers are basically entirely controlled with this stalk coming off the steering column on the right side. That's pretty common for a lot of cars. But while this stalk controls the washer and your wiper speed, it doesn't control the speed of the intermittent wipers. Instead, that's controlled with a completely separate dial located here in the center control stack. You twist it to change the speed of your intermittent wipers from like less time between wipes to more time between wipes, strangely not located near the wiper controls themselves. Also a little bit unusual, the climate controls are integrated neatly into this little panel, as you can see, but then your window defroster is completely separate. It's located over here, not shared with the rest of the climate controls between the door locks and the power top button. A little bit of odd placement. Again, another quirk of this interior. And how about this for a quirk? The ambient lighting. In modern cars, you have this light piping going all the way through the interior. It can dance and change colors. In this car, there is an ambient light mounted on the door panel right here. Out of this hole with a light inside of it pointing towards the dashboard. It's intended to provide a little ambient light, a little illumination when you're driving at night. It is very strange, but that's what passed for ambient lighting in this era. And how about this? Go back to the driver's footwell, and you can see there's a little riddle that helps you find the battery. See, there's an image of the battery on this panel, and then a question mark. The battery? Where? And then there's an image of the car with the front trunk open, letting you know that the battery is in the front trunk. And indeed, it is under this plastic panel in the front trunk. That's your battery location if you were trying to find it. Again, this is another panel they didn't want to translate into multiple languages like battery and front, so they gave you a little cartoon where you could follow along. Our last interesting thing in this car is the convertible top situation. Of course, all Boxster models were convertibles, and the way it worked was this switch in the center control stack I've already shown you. If you wanted the top up, you pressed the car with the roof closed. If you wanted it down, you pressed it the other way. And it was a pretty simple operation. You press the top, and you can see it closes rather quickly, completely power operated. You don't have to do anything except when the top finally reaches its kind of final spot at the top of the windshield, you do have to manually latch it closed onto the windshield to latch it in place. And it's the same deal when you're opening the top. You can't just press the button. You have to first unlatch it, and then you press the button, and you can see the top goes down fairly quickly and fairly easily, all power operated. The parking brake has to be on to do it, although you don't have to be stopped completely. So if you just pull the parking brake up a tick or two, you can be driving kind of slowly and still operate the top, although that is a secret of Boxster ownership. And next up, we move outside the car. And I mentioned earlier, it's pretty practical despite being a two-seater, at least on the inside. And that's also true on the outside. This car has two different trunks, two storage compartments. Up front, you can see the trunk contains the battery, like I mentioned before, plus the CD changer and a spare tire. And yet, in addition to that, it's actually a pretty roomy place where you could put some cargo, some luggage up there too. But in addition to the front trunk, which is pretty common on Porsche models, you also have a second rear trunk back here, and you pop it open and you can see it is also surprisingly spacious. You got decent room in here for more luggage, more storage, and really it is a surprisingly practical car. Although the rear trunk is more interesting than just a cargo storage compartment, you also have a few mechanical items in here since the engine is mid-mounted in this car, kind of underneath the trunk. So you look up in this little circle area and you can see there is a dipstick you can use to check your oil. You have an oil cap where you unscrew it and you can add oil, and then you also have a coolant cap where you can unscrew and add coolant. Although my favorite mechanical item in the rear trunk is actually this little window, which is intended to be a gauge showing you how much coolant this car still has. You have your coolant measurer right there as part of your trunk on this little window. It's actually pretty cleverly designed, as is the rest of this car. And in fact, I think of this car as kind of a miracle of packaging if you really think about it. You have, Behind the seats in this car, the convertible top stows completely, the engine is back here, and you have a fairly sizable trunk. All of that stuff just in the rear half of this car, and yet the car is still a very reasonably sized 170 inches long, which makes it pretty manageable and pretty tossable and helps keep its size and weight down to make it especially fun on the road. It really is genius packaging, this car. And by the way, since we're talking about the engine, all Boxster models used a flat 6, or as it's called, a Boxer 6, which is how the name for this car came about. You had the Boxer engine, that's box, and it was a roadster. And Porsche combined that, Boxster, and they created this car. And they also created one of the great confusing things in the world for people on the internet who often forget the S in roadster and call it just Boxster, which is how it's said, just Boxster, but it actually does have that little S in there since it came from the word roadster. Now, the base model Boxster first came out in '97 and it had about 200 horsepower from its flat 6. The Boxster S, this version, only joined later and it had about 250 horsepower, so a pretty significant power increase for the S. As for the Boxster itself, its story is kind of interesting. This car was conceived, like I mentioned before, in a time where Porsche was in some pretty serious financial turmoil. In fact, some really dire financial straits. And they had some big decisions to make about the future of this company. That's one of the reasons why this car shared its front end with the 911. It couldn't really afford to do it any other way. The Boxster concept first came out in 1993. That really was kind of the low period for Porsche. And then the car was developed, it went on sale, and it was a big hit. And this car, combined with the redesigned 996 911, really helped start the turnaround in Porsche's fortunes that began in the late 90s. This car was a big success, that was a big success, the money started coming in, Porsche was able to reprioritize, put that money towards the Cayenne SUV, which came out in '03, and all of these cars helped put Porsche on the sturdy footing that they would need to continue as a car brand even up to today. So this was kind of the dark era of Porsche, but it was this car that helped kind of rescue the brand and pull them out into the successful Porsche that we now know. Anyway, that's the Boxster. Now it's time to get it out on the road, and I'm going to especially explain to you why I think this car is such a good bargain, a great sports car for the money. All right, driving the 986 Boxster S. I have driven many of these over the years. And I have always truly loved this car, and there are a lot of reasons why that's true. It's just so nice to drive. It just really is. Like, I know all of the whole thing. Everybody thinks that it's not a 911. It's the lesser version of the Porsche. It's the cheap Porsche because you couldn't afford 911. All that stuff goes out your head when you're actually driving this car. And especially considering, yeah, it is the cheap Porsche. That's the benefit. That's what makes it so great. You get so many thrills. It's just so exciting to use this car. So let's start with the obvious, the shifter and clutch situation. It's wonderful. This car's clutch feels a little heavier than what I'm used to in a Boxster S. I don't know if it's been modified or upgraded or something like that. However, generally speaking, and the shifter is just perfect. These Porsche shifters just had the exact right amount of weight and the right amount of feel at this era, and they were just so amazingly good. They were just wonderful. And then there was the acceleration. Now this, I think, is an important thing to keep in mind. This is a late Boxster S, a late 986 S. A lot of people tell you that the 986 Boxster was pretty slow. Yeah, the early base model cars were slow. I don't think the S was ever slow, but the late model S is definitely not slow. Like, this car is legitimately fast and legitimately exciting, even just in a straight line. It has good power. It has very easily accessible power. Because the clutch and shifter are both so easy and so pleasurable, you actually have no qualms about making a good downshift, getting up into the rev range, and going after some more power. And it's easy to do, and it's fun to do. But it's also not that necessary. This car is surprisingly potent, even at under 5,000 RPM. Although above, it's fun. Like, this is a fun car. Oh man. God, this car is an absolute blast. And then, of course, there's the way it goes around corners. I just love how tossable this car is. I love Porsches from this era were just so beautifully, perfectly designed to be so tossable and enjoyable and exciting in so many ways. They're just perfect at that exact job. And this car, you just feel no guilt about throwing it into a corner and getting your way out of it and just having an absolute blast of a hell of a good time doing so. And I think that this car, as a result of that, is just one of the more exciting driving experiences you can have, especially for this money. I mean, 20 grand buys you the nicest one of these around, and a lot of them can be had for a lot less, and it's just so fun. I get the complaint that it's not a 911, but I really truly believe that is primarily an ego thing. This car, from a driving perspective, I mean, I love 993s and I love 996s, but this car is almost as exciting. It really, truly, truly is. Like, it is such an absolute thrill of a good time to enjoy. And the mid-engine helps balance, and the car feels so light and so tossable and so eager. I love cars that feel eager. It feels like it's excited when you throw it around. It feels like it wants to rev higher. It is smooth. It is well engineered, well designed. It's just great. And there are so many independent Porsche service shops that, you know, it's pretty easy to get these things serviced. Obviously, if you have a motor blow, which happens, that's a whole different conversation. But the price of entry is reasonable, and especially a late Boxster S, a post like 01, 02, 03, 04 era kind of Boxster S. The 986 was actually a really good car. Enthusiasts don't like to admit that because it means admitting that, you know, less than a 911 can be great, but it can, and in this case, it is. It's just so lovely. Lovely to use, easy, eager, quick. There's just so many great things about this car, especially for the money. It is just a fun, analog, enjoyable, tossable, exciting, good sports car. And so that's the 986 Porsche Boxster S. It may not be a 911, but it's cool, it's fun, and it's shockingly cheap to buy. And you won't be thinking about those Porsche purists when you're going hard around a corner having a blast, which you will in this car. And you can buy this one on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give this Boxster S a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 53 out of 100, which puts the Boxster S here against some similar cars. I really love the 986 Boxster S. I think it's exceptionally fun to drive, tossable, exciting, and even surprisingly fast. And I think it's absolutely a fantastic choice for the money. I understand purists won't ever really accept it compared to a 911, but who cares? This car is a fantastic deal, and it's a lot more exciting than most people realize.